What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WrestleRant, where every single Tuesday I, Graham GSM Matthews, break down all the pay-per-views and live specials I watch on the WWE Network, as well as on the Global Wrestling Network. With WrestleMania 34 and NXT TakeOver New Orleans quickly approaching, today we're talking NXT TakeOver Orlando from almost exactly 1 year ago. And what a great show it was. I was there for both this and WrestleMania 33. So I was looking forward to watching this show and rewatching it and reviewing it as I am today. And also rewatching WrestleMania 33 before next week to review it for WrestleRant with that 1 year retrospective thoughts on it kind of thing. I mean, it's easy to rewatch the show in the immediate aftermath of the event, but it's a lot cooler to kind of look back at what has changed in the last year since these shows, which is why I do WrestleRant. But nonetheless, guys, we'll start off the show here with the 8-man tag team match, or 8-person tag team match, I should say. It was Sanity, Alexander Wolf, Eric Young, Nikki Cross, and Killian Dane, taking on Roderick Strong, Ty Dillinger, Ruby Riott, and their surprise partner, Cassius Ohno. So that spot was originally reserved for No Way Jose, who had been feuding with Sanity for a few months, but at the fan access, WrestleMania fan access, event that they do over the weekend, No Way Jose was attacked there, I believe on the Saturday, earlier on that Saturday morning, thus on being able to compete in this matchup. The surprise opponent, or the surprise partner for the babyfaces, as I had said, was Cassius Ohno, who it was really surprising to me. I mean, he was a great fit for this match. I thought he was a much better fit for the match than No Way Jose. But I thought it was weird in the first place that he wasn't part of the show. The guy came back to NXT a few months earlier, went immediately for the NXT Championship, lost, and that was it. He wasn't even booked for TakeOver, so I think it was pretty evident from the get-go that Ohno would be a stepping stone or kind of a helping out, a coach of sorts to the younger talent in NXT, and not really meant to be a prominent player on the brand. But nonetheless, this was a fun match. The real rivalry here was between Ty Dillinger and Eric Young. They had been feuding since the previous TakeOver San Antonio, I believe it was, over Royal Rumble weekend. It was a fun match. Thought it was the perfect match to kick off the show. Sanity have been kind of like the curtain jerkers of these takeovers in the last number of years, over the last number of months, I should say, with TakeOver San Antonio, this TakeOver Chicago, and maybe there might have been one other TakeOver they opened. I know they weren't in the opening of TakeOvers, War Games, or the summer one. I don't know about Royal Rumble weekend. I don't think so. What opened the Royal Rumble weekend one this year? I was there. I don't know why I'm forgetting right now. The Philadelphia one. I don't think they were in the opening, though. They was the Authors of Pain and Undisputed Era. I don't even think they were on the show. Or they were. I don't fucking remember. Anyway, getting back to TakeOver Orlando here for a second. Fun match. Everyone was able to shine at one point or another, and they worked well together. In the end, though, it was Sanity emerging victorious. The crowd was hot for the match. Ty Dillinger. It's amazing. I mean, it was obvious by this point that he was getting called up to the main roster because there was literally nothing left for him to do in NXT. They were having him do the honors on the way out. He would beat Eric Young on an episode of NXT TV right after this, right after he was called up. So he did win his final match on his way out of NXT, which was kind of fitting as like the ultimate enhancement talent in NXT. He was the sole person to beat someone on his way out of the brand. But I thought putting over the group on the whole was good. It made Sanity look strong. I thought it was weird for Ohno to lose in his first TakeOver match back, but nonetheless a good match with kind of a flat finish, but the right people won, I would say, in retrospect. After that, we had the debut of Aleister Black taking on Andrade Cien Almas, and that sounds familiar. We're getting the same match this year over WrestleMania weekend, this time for the NXT Championship. So what a difference a year can make. Aleister Black has always been awesome from day one. This being day one, he had a great showing here. Andrade Cien Almas has always been a great wrestler, but he never really had much of a character, and he was a great heel by this point, but he was floundering beyond belief. And it wasn't until he linked up with Zelina Vega a few months after this that he really started to find his footing as a great heel, as an awesome heel on the rise that would eventually win the NXT Championship later on in 2017. But as a match, this was fun. It was a bit more competitive than I expected, and probably than what it should have been. Almas really had nothing to lose here because he really, in respect, and I say that in respect to the fact that the guy was a loser anyway. So if he lost another match by being squashed by Aleister Black, it wasn't going to matter much regardless. They should have made Black out to be more dominant than they did in this match, but they would bounce back from that very quickly with the squash matches on NXT TV, so it hardly mattered. But as a match, it was fun, though. I will say, being in the arena for this, it was very hard to pay attention to the match. You had, and you can hear it on the show, too, when you watch it back on the network. The section that I was in, like 203 or 202 or 222, something weird like that. One of the 200 sections. That's where I was sitting with my good buddy Jason. As you guys know, he's been here on the channel multiple times, countless times. During the course of this match, our section was chanting for themselves. They were chanting for all this random shit. And it got to the point where the entire arena heard our section. And I'm not talking about me and Jason. It was like a one row of our section that was being absolutely obnoxious. And the rest of the arena heard this. And they started chanting at the end of this matchup, "Shut the fuck up," at our section, which was very audible during this show. So if you watch back TakeOver Orlando and you're wondering, why are they saying that during this match? Because, they're not chanting it at the wrestlers. That's why. They were chanting it at our section. And thank God, too, because they were still pretty loud and obnoxious in the remainder of the show, but not as bad as they were before this match. So it was hard to pay attention in the moment, but watching it back, this was a very fun match. A successful showcase for the debuting Aleister Black, who went over strong and pressed people in victory. Awesome entrance, great finisher. That's why people were kind of sitting on their hands for the finisher, just because, first of all, they didn't know the Black Mass was his finisher, and also because they were too distracted by our obnoxious section. So, nonetheless, though, a good first night for Aleister Black in NXT. After that, for the NXT Tag Team titles, the defending champions Authors of Pain defending against DIY and the Revival in a triple threat tag team elimination match. This was, in my opinion, the match of the weekend for WWE. And WrestleMania had a lot of fun matches. This TakeOver had a lot of good matches. But I thought this was the best of the bunch. DIY and the Revival, of course, had some amazing matches in the latter half of 2016, both at Brooklyn 2 and the Toronto TakeOver. The Authors of Pain and DIY had a very good match at TakeOver San Antonio as well. The Authors of Pain were still coming into their own as a dominant tag team and having good matches. And early on, it was evident they were being carried to quality contests. But as time progressed, it became more and more apparent that they were indeed improving and that they could hold their own in the ring against the Revival, against DIY, and later on against other tag teams like Sanity and Undisputed Era. This was a real good match. And the elimination stipulation helped a lot. They did use tables. I don't think it was no DQ, but DIY did pull out a table early on that I forgot who it was, but Akam or Rizar was put through. I loved in the early beginning, kind of unlike what we saw in Elimination Chamber a few weeks ago, where the Revival and DIY were working together for like a good portion of the match to eliminate Authors of Pain. Like there was one point where Johnny Gargano had on the Gargano escape on the front of the face of Rezar or Akam, and then one member of the Revival had on their signature knee bar on the other end of Akam or Rezar, on the same person. And they didn't tap out. The other member of Authors of Pain broke it up. It was a great near fall. The people were buying into it. They were on their feet for this entire thing. This was easily the hottest match of the night. And all three teams had stellar showings here. So again, Authors of Pain were really protected here. Really protected. They take out DIY by pinning Tommaso Ciampa with the last chapter. Crowd starts chanting bullshit. I did think it was weird they got rid of the babyface tag team first and left the Revival to be put in there with Authors of Pain. That was a bit odd, but they were behind the Revival. The Revival were popular, so having them be in there with the Authors of Pain was hardly a mistake. I just thought it was weird that DIY would not last longer, considering the Revival were main roster bound anyway. They were headed to Raw a few days after this. But nonetheless, though, even before they eliminated DIY and the Revival were working together to the point where they were using each other's finishers, where a member of DIY and the Revival executed the Shatter Machine, and then the other member of DIY and the other member of the Revival did the combo that DIY did for their finisher, like the kick and whatever it was, where they kicked their opponent in the middle of the ring. I forgot what it was called. But they executed that to perfection, too, and the crowd, again, ate this shit up. They were white hot for this. They were white hot for this entire sequence. They got rid of DIY. People were not happy about that, but like I said, they were very much behind the Revival in the remainder of the contest. The Authors of Pain, again, emerging victorious here, looking very strong in victory, not even in defeat. They retained their titles, eliminating both DIY and the Revival, and their feud with DIY would continue going into TakeOver Chicago. But again, as a match, though, this was a lot of fun. The Revival, you had to know they weren't winning. You had to know. That's why I would have put DIY in that spot instead, where I think DIY had a better shot of retaining their titles, or winning back the belts, I should say, than the Revival did, because by this point it was very obvious they were main roster bound. So I don't think anyone really bought into the near falls with them against the Authors of Pain down the stretch. But again, it was still really well done. The crowd was still hot for it, even after DIY was eliminated, and it was a great match. And in my opinion, the match of the weekend for WWE over WrestleMania 33 weekend. After that, for the NXT Women's Championship, we had Asuka defending against Ember Moon in a match that was many months in the making from when Ember Moon debuted in NXT over TakeOver Brooklyn 2 at TakeOver Brooklyn 2 back in August. She had been built up as this undefeated challenger for Asuka, who had been undefeated since showing up in NXT a year and a half earlier. And she had held on to the NXT Women's Championship for exactly 1 year by this point. And I was convinced that Ember Moon was taking that title and Asuka was headed to the main roster. Maybe not right after WrestleMania, but a few months down the road after getting her rematch and also losing that. But no, she would have retained the title here as well. And the match was not given a ton of time. It was only given 12 minutes. The tag team title match went about 25 minutes. The main event almost went a half hour. A little long in the tooth was that match. I'm not sure why that match went almost 30 minutes, and the women's match was only 12 minutes long. It ended a bit abruptly, too. So I liked the finish. I thought it was weird at the time, but in retrospect, I liked it because they were building up Asuka as this champion that knew, as, you know, when her reign continued to progress, and she held on the title. She held on to the championship for longer and longer and longer and longer. The longer she held that belt, she knew the more in jeopardy her title reign was. You know, she had that fear that her title reign would end. So she was getting more and more desperate. And in doing so, she pushed the referee into the turnbuckle for the finish. Ember Moon falls off the top turnbuckle, and Asuka pins her with a kick to the head. So again, it felt abrupt. Felt like it could have gone on for a number more minutes. Still a good match, though. I enjoyed it. You could feel the intensity. Ember Moon had a very good showing here. She would not lose anything in defeat. She had another match at Brooklyn 2 many months after the fact, which was also excellent, which was, I thought, way better than this. I thought this was a very good match. But the match I was hoping to see from these two would actually happen at Brooklyn 2 that August. But this was very good, though. Asuka retaining the title, which shocked me, but it was a good match, though. Before we got to the main event, we see a familiar face in the crowd watching from the audience, that being Drew McIntyre. And that took the entire audience by surprise. Me specifically. Jason and I were watching up from the fucking nosebleeds. We're watching the show from the nosebleeds. And after a frustrating night of all these awful crowd chants in our section and the fans being obnoxious, and the show was good. The show was very good. Just the crowd kind of ruined it for me in the moment. But watching it back, I can appreciate the show for what it was. But yeah, we got the special appearance from Drew McIntyre on the show, who, I don't know if he was still the Impact Grand Champion. By that point, I think he was already gone from the company. He had been gone from Impact for like a month. I think he might have dropped the Impact Grand title on TV, on TNA TV, like a few weeks before this. But it was still a cool moment. It reminded me a lot of when Bobby Roode showed up in the crowd over WrestleMania 32 weekend, and the same TakeOver Dallas. And that would lead to him coming in, Drew McIntyre, that is, at the next set of tapings and becoming their chosen one on his path to become the NXT champion. So, got a big pop. I was not expecting that. Of all the departures from TNA after their changeover from the new management, I was expecting, maybe a Mike Kanellis who would go on to WWE anyway, but to the main roster, not NXT. But Drew McIntyre was a name that took me by surprise, and I was very happy to see him in the crowd, and I went nuts. So we get to the main event, a rematch from the main event of NXT TakeOver San Antonio for the NXT Championship. It was Bobby Roode defending against Shinsuke Nakamura. I really, really enjoyed the San Antonio match. This was also a good match. They worked well together. The matches weren't amazing enough to the point where it was like one of my favorite feuds in NXT history. Like, the feud itself was good, but it wasn't like great enough to the point where, I don't know, I thought it was good. I just did not think they had amazing chemistry together, and watching this match back kind of solidified that for me. It was a good match. I think it helped that Nakamura and Rude were super over with the audience, their theme songs respectively, but both guys were very popular. They were training for Nakamura, then they were training for Rude, and then they chanted for both of them. So the atmosphere for the match I thought was great. The match itself, you take away the crowd, you put this on a main roster pay-per-view, I don't think it gets the same reaction. That's my personal opinion. Or it's not as good of a match, I'll say. And like I said earlier, the crowd for me in being there, it was hard to pay attention to the match with my section being so obnoxious literally up until the very end. But it was a good match, though. Went a little longer, like way longer than it should have. It almost fucking 28 minutes. That's a long time for a match that wasn't like that good. It was a very good match, but it wasn't like amazing enough to the point where it needed 30 minutes. But Bobby Roode in the end hitting 2 glorious DDTs on Shinsuke Nakamura to retain his championship clean. And Nakamura bows out, and that is his final NXT match ever before being called up to SmackDown Live 2 days or 3 days afterward. So yeah, very good main event. Bobby Roode retaining his championship as he should have. No title changes on the show, which is why it didn't really feel like a newsworthy night. We did have the appearance from Drew McIntyre and the debut of Aleister Black, so it was a good show. I've been to, at this point, 4 takeovers. I went to this one, TakeOver Philly, earlier this year, and the 2 Brooklyn shows, or the first 2 Brooklyn shows. I was not at Brooklyn 3, unfortunately. I was at the first 2. This was easily the weakest of those takeovers that I've been to, but we've never had a bad takeover. It was an enjoyable show. I thought WrestleMania was actually better than TakeOver for once. I thought this was a pretty good show, but WrestleMania was better, in my opinion. But it was an enjoyable evening on the whole. So definitely check it out on the WWE Network ahead of TakeOver New Orleans next weekend. TakeOver Orlando. If there's any one match to watch, it would be the tag team title match. But the overall show, 2.5 hours long. You can never go wrong. You can never go wrong with some NXT. So check it out on the WWE Network at your leisure. So that being said, folks, as I said earlier, next week, my grand review of WrestleMania 33, my on-site report from the show 1 year later, almost exactly to the day. So I'm looking forward to breaking it down for you guys and giving my thoughts on NXT TakeOver, or rather, excuse me, I'm looking at the NXT TakeOver card right now. I'm giving my thoughts on WrestleMania 33, 1 year after the fact. So stay tuned for that next week right here on WrestleRant. In the meantime, in the between time, folks, you guys can like this video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. You can find me on the Twitter machine. Follow me there at WrestleRant. Find me on Facebook as well, like the page. Give it all a thumbs up at facebook.com/gram.gsm.matthews. And that's about it. All the links are down below if you missed any of that. So anyway, guys, have a great rest of your week. Enjoy the WrestleMania season. I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road to WrestleMania.